Well, Rishi Sunak has hosted a breakfast to try to convince his MPs to support the Rwanda bill in tonight's vote. The legislation is due to be debated in the Commons very shortly. Joining me now is David Davies, former Conservative Party chair. Good to talk to you today. Do you think Rishi Sunak can get this Safety of Rwanda bill through Parliament?
Yes, I think he can, and I think it ought to get through. I mean, I'm not a whip. I haven't been talking to all my colleagues at great length, but the ones I have talked to are very anxious that we get this done because it was a promise which, frankly, we inherited from Boris's prime ministership, and we ought to deliver it.
If it gets through, though, do you think it will happen today? Is there a possibility that there will be enough protests to kick it into the long grass until the new year?
Well, it's got to do other stages. It's got to do the committee stage and so on, and then got to go to the House of Lords. It won't get to committee stage until the new year anyway. The argument today is going to be about whether we debate this through or whether we get rid of it straight away. And I mean, I'm strongly of the view that this is actually the optimum. It's very difficult. If you go any further than Rishi has proposed to go, it wrecks things like the Good Friday Agreement and wrecks things like the free trade agreement with the European Union. If you don't go that far, if you go less, then you leave open loopholes. So it's a piece of law. It's never perfect, but I'm hoping that my colleagues, and I think they will, I think the vast majority will, want to get it on, get it delivered, and then get the Rwanda policy working.
But the more right-wing groups within the party, we saw them come out yesterday, they have taken legal advice and they are not happy with it. They don't think it goes far enough. They don't think it does what it says on the tin. Yeah,
well, unlike them, I've actually taken the British government to court and defeated it in the European Court, and I've also defeated the European Court in the British Parliament. I know this battlefield quite well. And what's more, people like Geoffrey Cox, past Attorney General, the current Attorney General, the chairman of the Bar Association, or even Lord Sumption, who's a constant critic of the government in this area, thinks that this is workable. Nobody pretends it's easy. Nobody pretends that there is a perfect solution, but this is as close as you're going to get to it, and it's got a pretty high chance of success, I think.
Why do you think these groups are opposing it?
Well, some of them have always hated the idea of being part of the European Convention on Human Rights. They tend to elide it with the European Union. They're pretty much all Brexiteer groups. But unfortunately, what they're likely to do is to damage Brexit, actually, because it'll undermine the current free trade agreement. So they don't like the idea of taking, as it were, in their view, orders from abroad. But the truth is, we are able to ignore those orders. One of the parts of this bill allows ministers to ignore the so-called Rule 39. That's the rule whereby the European Court in the middle of the night passes an injunction which stops the aircraft on the tarmac, as it were. Well, we think that's unwise, not sensible, given the way we've rejigged the Rwanda treaty, and therefore the minister can ignore it if he thinks it's being unreasonable, and I think that's what will probably happen.
How do you think Rishi Sunak has got himself into this mess? He should be able to command control of his party, shouldn't he?
Well, bear in mind, he didn't invent this policy. It was, as it were, handed down to him by his predecessors, and in a frankly imperfect state. And it was in front of the courts when he took over as leader. He had to wait and see what the court said. That's only reasonable. Anything else would be disrespectful. We got the list of objections from the court. He's fixed all of those, and that's what's in front of the party. But, you know, parties have these internal frictions all the time. I mean, people have been referring back to the last time a major bill was defeated at second reading, which was the Sunday trading bill right back in 1986. They forget at that time we were also losing by-elections. We were way behind in the polls, and Margaret Thatcher nearly had to resign over the Heseltine-Westland crisis. So this happens from time to time. The public understand this is a difficult problem. They know that. The number of people who come up to me in the street and the station and so on and said, you know, this is really tough, really difficult, isn't it? We hope you can get through it. And the answer is yes.
Tough, but you know, Rishi Sunak inherited this, but it's his decision to keep going with it, isn't it? He could have listened to what the Supreme Court had said and said, right, I'm going to take it on the chin. I'm going to say this is a failed policy. It was brought in by my predecessors. We've not managed to send a single person to Rwanda. Even if we do, it's going to be a drop in the ocean compared to the number who are coming to this country.
Well,
So he's the one who's chosen to pursue it, isn't he?
Well,
it appears to be tearing the Conservative Party apart.
No, it's quite interesting you say that, because I mean, as you say, it was inherited in a way. The Supreme Court did not say these things were not correctable, but there's one other dimension that people aren't noticing in all of this, and that is that a number of other countries, Denmark, Germany, Italy, and others, are watching us like hawks. Because if this works, if we get 500 migrants off to Rwanda in the sort of early part of next year, in spring of next year, they'll be copying it. And all of a sudden, you're going to get a third country approach to this right across Europe. That's likely to have a real deterrent effect on the entire migrant industry.
How much damage do you think this is causing the Conservative Party? William Hague has written a piece in the Times today, which you may have seen. Some have principles that suggest the bill is too weak, he says. Others is that it's too strong. But if they don't shape up quickly, the Conservatives will soon have more principles between them than they have seats in Parliament. He says your party is fighting on a cliff edge. Wouldn't Rishi Sunak be advised to step back from that cliff edge? I think William Hague has a point, and it's the point I would make to my colleagues. Some of them think that they're undermining the Prime Minister. I mean, there have been all sorts of rumours about why people are doing that, but some think they're doing that. What they're actually doing is reducing the number of seats we'll win at the next election, and that's almost certainly what's going on, and particularly if this bill doesn't go through. I think if the bill goes through, people will suddenly see it's been worth the fight, but it's got to go through and it's got to succeed for that to happen. OK. David Davis, we'll leave it there. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.